On behalf of the Swedish Academy, it is my privilege to convey to you our warmest congratulations on the Nobel Prize in Literature 2024.
She is the first Korean and first Asian woman to win the Nobel Prize in Literature. The Nobel Prize in Literature, established in 1901, has been awarded to a total of 121 people as of 2024. However, since Sweden's Selma Lagerlöf became the first woman to win the award in 1909, among the 121 winners, there are only 18 women, including Han Kang. Celebrating Han Kang's winning of Nobel Prize, ARE Diplomats decided to work together with Embassies in Korea to discuss some of the female Nobel Literature Prize winners and their works. And we are going to find out what universal message their works are sending to all of humanity.
I wouldn't have been able to use that library, and maybe I'd never have become a writer.
Piececitos de niño, azulosos de frío.
Why do they come here? Why to us?
Qu'il les méritait ou non n'a évidemment aucun sens.
Como
Que cela
ven,
commence à m'être
nos
aussi étranger que s'il s'agissait d'une autre
piececitos
femme
heridos,
ne change
por
rien
los
à
guijarros
ceci.
todos.
She was a lifelong advocate of writing for human freedom and dignity.
One of the great gorillas of the imagination.
뜨거운 가슴과 차가운 머리를 가진 작가다.
고디머의 문학 그 자체가 남아공 역사다.
Hello, my name is Sindiswa Ntombolimo Mququ, the Ambassador of the Republic of South Africa to the Republic of Korea. Celebrating Han Kang's winning the Nobel Prize in Literature, I'm here to introduce the author, Nadine Gordimer.
This court has found me guilty on all counts. If I have ever been certain of anything in my life, it is that I acted according to my conscience on all counts. I would be guilty only if I were innocent of working to destroy racism in my country.
She was born in 1923. Nadine Gordimer was the daughter of a middle-class Jewish couple who had fled to South Africa as refugees.
유대교라고 하는 게 갖고 있는 반기독교적인 정서 일부, 그 부모 이제 세대가 그걸 가지고 있어서 자유주의적인 그런 분위기 안에서 공부를 했거든요. 그래서 흑인들에 대해서 뭐 딱히 이렇게 다른 백인들과 달리 좀 동정적이고 연민적인 이제 그런 정서를 가지고 있었다고 보통은 이제 평가를 하죠.
At the time, South Africa was governed by the minority white regime with severe racial discrimination, where black citizens had no freedom, living in poverty and squalor under the oppressive apartheid policies.
뭐 1976년 소웨토 봉기라든지 흑인들의 끊임없는 저항이라든지 이런 것들을 통해 가지고 국제사회의 또 질타라든지 뭐 이런 부분들이 전개되니까 1990년 실질적으로 종식이 됩니다. 그래서 만델라가 1994년 대통령이 당선되면서 아파르테이트가 공식적으로 해체가 되는.
Witnessing the contradictions of apartheid from a young age, Gordimer became aware of political realities from a young age and in 1953 published her first novel, The Lying Days, in which she began to openly oppose racial segregation policies.
It's a novel in which you have a first-person narrator, Helen Shaw, who is a young, white, English-speaking teenager, I suppose, adolescent, growing up in a small mining town outside Johannesburg.
Two mine boys were coming toward me, past me. The one wearing his tin underground helmet and khaki trousers drawn in with string around his bare ankles. The other in a raggy loincloth beneath a gray blanket patterned with yellow and cyclamen whorls. I looked straight ahead sternly. When I had gone on a bit, I looked back. But they were a long way off, not caring. A curious feeling prickled round my shoulders. Was there something to be afraid of?
Gordimer herself described The Lying Days, which captures the struggles and disorientation of youth, her only autobiographical novel.
I mean, one thing that's very important to understand about Gordimer's writing is that it's always committed to two main goals, what she called the necessary gesture and the essential gesture. Now, the necessary gesture is the need for a writer to provide national testimony, to bear witness to what's happening in their country. The essential gesture is the need to transform that experience into art. So by that she means writers take experiences and by transforming them in their imagination, they reveal the full meaning and significance of that experience.
Even while the darkness doused the crowd, a new light came up, and with it an ecstatic shrill scream, a note out of the normal range of the human voice. The crowd drowned it hoarsely, cutting across it with rasping throats. The municipal office was burning. A shot cracked like a whip above their heads. There were more shots and their echo, clearing a split second of silence in the space of the retort. The man with the stones looked up with a movement of surprise, as if someone had tapped him on the shoulder. Then he fell, the stones spilling before him. I knew I had never seen anyone fall like that before.
In 1960, the arrest of her close friend, Betty du Toit, and witnessing the Sharpeville massacre spurred Gordimer's entry into the anti-apartheid movement.
고디머 같은 경우에는 아프리카 작가회의라든지 저항운동 단체가 불법일 때부터 관여를 하고 하면서 실제적으로 같이 운동을 해 나갔습니다. 저항운동 활동가들의 변호 활동 이런 부분들을 많이 도와주고, 그리고 그 성명서라든지 에세이 같은 것들을 통해 가지고 국제사회에 호소를 하면서 석방을 호소하는 경우라든지, 심지어는 남아공 공영방송에 자기 이름이나 작품 같은 부분들은 방송하지 마라 라고 얘기를 하면서 그런 식으로 또 이제 저항을 하기도 했습니다.
Many of her books were banned in South Africa, but there were also more concrete consequences, if you like. She was under surveillance by the apartheid government. Her phone was tapped. She was followed around. She was visited by the police. So these were all attempts by the apartheid government to intimidate her and to stop her from acting in the way she did.
She joined Nelson Mandela's African National Congress and even helped edit Mandela's famous speech, "I am prepared to die," delivered as his final speech during the Rivonia trial, where he was charged for conspiring to overthrow the apartheid regime.
I have dedicated my life to this struggle of the African people. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
During a time when many artists resisting racial discrimination chose exile, Gordimer chose to stay in South Africa. This was a sign of bravery on her part, and one would also state that her race made it possible for her to challenge the ban on her books, a privilege that was not for Black contemporaries. Blacks had no rights.
아파르테이트에 묶여가지고 제대로 작품 활동 이런 부분들을 하지 못하는 상황에서 이제 작품을 발표하고 제한적이지만 이런 것들을 비판적으로 이렇게 쓸 수 있는 작가들은 거의 백인 작가들밖에 없어서,
아파르테이트 체제에 대해서 비판적인 목소리를 내는 작가들, 이 작가들을 이제 백인 정부가 쫓아내거든요. 쫓아낼 때 백인 정부가 비행기 티켓을 하나 이제 구해서 주는데 그 비행기 티켓이 다 편도, 출국행 비행기 표만 주는 거죠. 돌아오지 말라는 뜻이죠. 실제로 그 원웨이 티켓을 받고 반강제적으로 자기 의사하고 상관없이 그러니까 남아공을 떠난 작가들이 꽤 되거든요. 그 중에 이제 하나도 고디머였고.
Realizing that the reality of South Africa was absent from books she loved, Gordimer committed to documenting it herself.
고디머 문학의 어떤 미학적 특징은 뭐냐면 형식적으로는 이제 유럽 안에 백인 작가들이 쓰고 있는 문학의 연장선상에 있다고 보입니다. 근데 내용적으로 다른 이제 백인 작가들하고 다르게 고디머는 굉장히 전투적인, 아프리카 흑인의 그래도 이제 정치적 입장이나 여기에 서서 이제 백인 주류 문학들, 이제 그다음에 주류 어떤 이데올로기들 이런 것들을 비판하는 내용을 갖고 있고.
3 years after winning the James Tate Black Memorial Prize for a Guest of Honor, Gordimer released one of her most renowned works, The Conservationist.
The Dead Man. There is a well-trampled clearing about it. The whole compound must have been down to have a look. Dead! Dead! Finish! The herdsman walks over delicately towards the object and, bending, turns his face back at his employer and says confidentially, rather as if he had been listening, "And now already is beginning to be little bit..." He wrinkles his nose, exposing the dirty horse teeth.
This symbol or figure, if you like, of the black body buried on the farm comes to haunt Meiring. It's a kind of reminder for him of the provisory or temporary nature of his occupation of the land in South Africa. So Meiring is a man who's deeply entrenched in the privileges of apartheid society, but he's also haunted by the tensions that it creates. So in a way, you could say he embodies some of the contradictions of white South Africans during apartheid.
Coming out of the mealie field, he has jumped a ditch and landed on a bank that gives way. His left leg plunges before him down into a hole. He must get his leg out of the mud, that's all. It has already seeped in over the top of the boot and through the sole, and holds him in a cold, thick hand round the ankle. A soft, cold, black hand. Ugh. As he heaves, the mud holds him, holds on, hangs on. It's suction, of course, that's all. The more he pulls, the greater the vacuum. He would get out of his boot if he could. But the leg's caught nearly to the knee. He pulls and pulls. Down there, he's pulled and pulled. It's absurd. He's begun to giggle with queer, panicky exasperation.
Another masterpiece released in 1979, Beggar's Daughter, cannot be overlooked. It is famously known as one of the works that greatly moved Nelson Mandela during his imprisonment. The novel depicts a group of white anti-apartheid activists seeking to overthrow the apartheid regime.
Burger's Daughter is at least inspired by real people and events. Probably the most important context to know about is the life and works of Bram Fischer. Bram Fischer's life closely parallels one of the characters of Burger's Daughter, Lionel Burger, who's the father of the main character, Rosa Burger.
My covenant is with the victims of apartheid. The situation in which I find myself changes nothing. There will always be those who cannot live with themselves at the expense of fullness of life for others. They know world history would be very easy to make if the struggle were taken up only on condition of infallibly favorable chances.
Let me give one particular scene, though, that stands out in Berger's Daughter. So it's just at the end of the first section. Rosa Berger, the main character, sees an old black man who's drunk and is beating a donkey, which has his family in a cart on the back of it. And Rosa realizes that she could intervene in this situation. She could report this man to the police, and that would alter this man's life completely by stopping the brutality of that moment. But she chooses not to do that.
I drove on. I don't know at what point to intercede makes sense for me. Every week, the woman who comes to clean my flat and wash my clothes brings a child whose make-believe is polishing floors and doing washing. I drove on because the horrible drunk was black, poor, and brutalized. If somebody's going to be brought to account, I am accountable for him, to him, as he is for the donkey. Yet the suffering. While I saw it, it was the sum of suffering to me. I didn't do anything. I let him beat the donkey. The man was a black. So a kind of vanity counted for more than feeling. I couldn't bear to see myself, her, Rosa Berger, as one of those whites who can care more for animals than people.
She sees an act of cruelty that the black man is committing on the donkey, but she brackets the idea that the whites in the country are committing similar acts of cruelty to the blacks. So, if you like, the more visible and obvious forms of brutality are sometimes easier to address than structural forms of brutality and racism. And we shouldn't punish the individual crime so much as trying to change the system through which those crimes can be committed.
Although banned in South Africa, Berger's Daughter was published in the UK. When Nelson Mandela was released from 27 years of imprisonment, he reportedly said, "I must meet Nadine," highlighting the novel's significance as a key text of the Apartheid era. I would like to introduce another novel. It is July's People.
그러니까 내전이 일어날까 말까 한 그런 분위기예요. 소설적 배경이. 그때 이제 줄라이라고 하는 백인 가정에서 일종의 어떤 뭐 이렇게 하역을 하는 흑인들이 이제 폭동을 일으킬 것 같으니까 자기가 모시던 주인을 데리고 안전한 시골로 이제 도망가는 얘기예요.
Why do they come here? Why to us? His wife had accepted his dictum when he arrived that night in a white man's bakkie with a visitation of 5 white faces floating in the dark. You don't understand. Nowhere else to go. I told you. White people here? Didn't you tell us many times how they live? A room to sleep in, another room to eat in, another room to sit in, a room with books, a hot water that is made like the lights we see in the streets at Volkslootdorp. All these things I've never seen. My children have never seen. The room for bathing, and even you there in the yard, you had a room for yourself for bathing. And you didn't even wash your clothes in there. There was a machine in some other room for that. Now you tell me nowhere.
And within this situation, you have the two main characters, Bam and Maureen Smales, with their 3 young children, who have no choice, really, except to flee the city to the rural village outside the city with their manservant, July, black manservant. And while they're there, you know, the assumptions that Bam and Maureen have about their politics and their liberal attitudes are put under a lot of pressure. So July's People is a novel that explores in great depth and with great clarity the tensions, if you like, and the complex interdependencies between whites and blacks in South Africa, an issue that was extremely pressing in the 1980s as it remains today.
By inverting dependency roles during a crisis, the novel forces readers to confront the fundamental inequalities of society.
She runs. She can hear the labored, muttering putter very clearly in the attentive silence of the bush around and ahead. The smell of boiled potatoes from a vine indistinguishable to her from others promises a kitchen, a house just the other side of next tree. There are patches where airy knobthorn trees stand free of undergrowth, and the grass and orderly clumps of Barberton daisies and drifts of Nemesia belong to the artful nature of a public park. She can still hear the beat beyond those trees and those, and she runs towards it. She runs.
While Gordimer was praised for her sharp critique of South Africa's reality and historical awareness, she also faced criticism for a perceived lack of representation of Black experiences and emotions, or accusations of being an empty literary voice as a white female writer. I would like to respond to these critiques with Gordimer's own words. In 1991, the Nobel Committee recognized Gordimer's fight for freedom and dignity by awarding her the Nobel Prize in Literature.
남아공에서 고디머가 이제 첫 번째죠.
It was great for South Africa and great for all democratic writers who lived there.
남아공은 물론 아프리카 전체에 대한 어떤 축제 분위기, 새로운 걸 만들어 나가는 희망의 분위기, 그런 것들을 좀 주었다라고 생각이 듭니다.
Three years after Gordimer received the Nobel Prize, on 27 April 1994, Nelson Mandela, elected a president of South Africa, declared the complete abolition of apartheid, marking the end of the evil and inhumane system.
유럽인들이 자기 편의에 맞게 만들어왔던 세계 시민주의나 사회동포주의 너머에 훨씬 더 이제 보편타당한 새로운 어떤 시민주의, 이거를 이제 문학적으로 꿈꿨던 이제 그런 인물이다.
Nadine Gordimer, who once said, "Truth isn't always beauty, but the hunger for it leaves us with a message through her works. When you see a wrong, don't look the other way because you are not directly affected. Stand up and be counted.
I write for myself. I write in order to explore the mystery of life. You should write as if you are already dead, so that whatever anybody says about you, however anybody attacks you, it doesn't matter. You have achieved. You've done what you wanted to do. I think that is the way, that you just must write with integrity to what you feel you ought to write. That has been my way.